Events begin to take place in a huge metropolis, where everything was a little different from the countryside. The main character continued to observe the huge skyscrapers and was surprised at how impressive they still looked. Watching the giant buildings, he also thought about how long the lights were on in them, and this is probably why residents spend a lot of money paying for electricity. Because of which the young man sincerely did not understand why this was happening, because he always thought that he should save a kerosene lamp while he was in the mountains, and at this time they use electricity like this, and this is a shameful waste of money. Nevertheless, he decided to forget the shortcomings of this city, because he understood that it was not for him to pay for it. Looking at the advertising sign in his hands, the boy remembered that he had completely forgotten about his business. And immediately after that, he began to scream with all his might for people to come to him, because he had the opportunity to cure any disease, because he is a little brilliant doctor, and his motto is that he cures any disease. The bright young man specialized in kidney failure, yang damage, irregular menstruation, headache, fever, and infertility. The street doctor literally guaranteed that his medicine would cure any disease. Concerned about her diagnosis, the girl decided to ask whether this medicine could really cure infertility. Hearing this question, the boy immediately thought about it before answering. As it turned out, in fact, he saw that the girl did not need this, because she was not the one he was talking about, because her face was red, her teeth were white, her body looked healthy, and her bones were strong. At first glance, this girl is absolutely healthy, and if she cannot give birth to a child, then the problem is most likely not in her. And it was really true, because of which the stranger asked for help, and the hero asked her to calm down, because he was going to settle everything. Meanwhile, the stranger's boyfriend was watching everything that was happening, and he was very angry that she was communicating with an unknown doctor. Having finally warmed up, the hero said that she would succeed with his help, because he would help with the birth of a big, white, and fat boy. At the same time, the groom approached the girl and exclaimed to the petty doctor, "Ask him how he dares to talk about the fact that he cannot have children." The man was literally shaking with anger, because he thought that this street doctor just wanted to die from such statements. The determined scoundrel decided to attack the good-natured doctor, trying to make a hit. Fortunately, the angry man was easily calmed down by passers-by, saying that there was no point in starting a fight here. Looking at this man, the hero immediately realized that his face was white and rough, he had greasy hair, he also had terrible breath, and probably felt a sharp pain in the middle of the night. These words really struck the man, and he didn't even know how to respond to this, and just remained silent. Walking away shyly, he only continued to be angry, because he realized that in fact the street doctor was right. Blushing with shame, the girl began to call her husband, because she really wanted to get help. Immediately, she again decided to ask the doctor whether he could really cure infertility, and asked him to tell him how her husband should be treated. Turning to the man, he exclaimed that he did not need treatment, because he was leaving, and this may mean that he did not have kidney failure. The hero didn't really mean it, and there is nothing shameful about kidney failure, but his illness is not that serious and he can cure it. For such thoughts, the man immediately ordered the doctor to apologize to him, because he did not want him to treat him, but in fact the hero was misunderstood, because he only wanted to help the stranger. Such situations only caused surprise in the guy, because he did not understand what was wrong with this city, because everyone here wanted to mock the doctor who wanted to help them. Having decided to undergo treatment, the man nevertheless came closer so that the doctor could examine him. Feeling very angry, the stranger still did not believe that he had any health problems and wanted to find out what exactly was wrong. The hero exclaimed that it turns out that the man does not just have kidney failure, it is caused by the fact that his yang guan is open, like Zen men, and also because of the duration of the disease, which is 5 or 6 years. These are most likely mental problems. Taking the medicine out of his pocket, the boy exclaimed that he had a bottle of medicine that would help him. He should take 1 tablet every night, and in 5 days he would be healthy, and after that he should be sure that there was nothing that would interfere with him wife to get pregnant. Feeling that it would really help, the elderly man still wanted to know how much this medicine cost. Looking at his patient, the smart doctor only smiled and continued to stare angrily. After all, the price of treatment was truly mind-boggling, and it was 300 yuan per bottle of medicine. Suddenly, a couple of elderly people started to leave because they thought that 300 yuan was too cheap for medicine, and they thought that the doctor was just lying, which is why they were going to go to the hospital. Seeing this reaction, the young man thought that it was actually too expensive for his patients, and even offered to reduce the price to 200 yuan. While catching up with his clients, the doctor shouted that this was their last chance and he could sell this medicine for 100 yuan. As they continued to leave, the couple even discussed that for 100 yuan they would rather buy a patch for their dog. Suddenly, the man decided to take pity, and still said that he was going to buy a bottle of this unusual medicine. For the young man, this was a truly joyful event, and he literally began to cry, because he was very hungry, and was finally able to earn his first money. The woman very much doubted that this medicine would work, but no one cared, because a crook from the street cannot be a good doctor. Suddenly, a stranger appeared in front of the couple and decided to say hello to them. After the greeting, the stranger exclaimed that she would give 1,000 yuan if the couple sold them this medicine. For them it was just a mind-blowing deal, and they did not understand whether the girl was really serious. Still, without hesitation, they agreed, because they understood that in this way they could earn good money. The strange girl also liked the fact that she was still able to buy medicine and was grateful to the people. Counting the money they had earned, the elderly couple were incredibly happy that they had gotten rid of the useless medicine. Some time later, the girl entered a certain room, where she turned to her sister and said that she had received the necessary medicine. The medicine seller had been watched for 2 whole days, and the sisters were discussing what they would do with him. For them, the little doctor who sold these medicines was indeed very unusual, because looking at this pill, it aroused interest. This medicine was mixed with various medicinal substances, which included yin and cold, and even had black scorpion poison in it. This was really amazing for my sister, because she didn't understand why add poison to the medicine, as if the seller wanted to kill someone. Understanding why the medicine needs poison, the girl said that all the ingredients are mixed in special proportions, it neutralizes the toxins it contains, and people with kidney failure will be able to stimulate yang in the body immediately after taking the pill. For girls, on the contrary, it will be much more powerful than some well-known aphrodisiacs. Suddenly, my little sister saw a rather familiar guy whom they could see on the street before. In fact, it was a medicine seller who decided to come to the cafe in order to have some food. Immediately the waitress decided to give the menu to the gentleman so that he could look at the dish and what was on the menu. Seeing the menu, the young man was simply stunned, because the cheapest noodles cost 30 yuan, and for him it was too expensive. Still, he understood that he needed to eat anyway, which is why he said that he would have a bowl of wonton noodles, which was the cheapest. Realizing how unfair the world is, the young man thought about what the master had previously told him to explore this world, and now he knows how unfair this world is. A few minutes later, the waitress brought incredibly delicious noodles, which contained a large amount of meat. Such a portion caused embarrassment in the guy, and he literally blushed, because he had not eaten for a very long time. Feeling great satisfaction, he continued to eat the noodles, and in a matter of seconds he experienced incredible pleasure because it was very tasty. The noodles we ate even contained shrimp, which tasted very good. The only downside to the new dish was that it was quite expensive and the hero couldn't afford to eat too much. Continuing to eat, he thought that in any case it was necessary to do something in order to earn more money. As soon as the guy finished eating, he immediately decided to call the waitress so that she would come to him. It was clear from the behavior of the main character that he was not very happy with the dish he had just eaten. After all, as it turned out, he found hair in the dish, and he wanted the waitress to look at the dish and tell her what happened to these noodles. Because of this serious flaw, the waitress literally began to panic and apologized to the guest. This was not enough for the hero, and he did not understand what kind of service this was, since in their cafe they apologized to the guest so much. The guy continued to quarrel, telling the waitress that she did not need to work here, and he would now go complain to her boss, because he believed that he should not pay for the spoiled dish. By shouting at the girl, he made her cry, and she again admitted that she was really to blame, and it was her hair. Still, waitress E realized that in this situation the client could also be to blame, because it could be his hair. These words angered the young man even more, because he thought that he was considered a freeloader, as if he had come here to eat for free, and if this were so, then he would not have eaten so little noodles, and even if she had offered a new portion noodles, he would still refuse. Having finished the quarrel, the young man still decided to pay money for poor service, and gave only 5 yuan. Dissatisfied, the waitress looked after the customer, who was very impudent with her, and left, paying only a small part of the cost of the dish. At the same time, the the sisters were communicating with each other, and one of them decided that it was necessary to follow this mysterious doctor, and they wanted such a person to join them in the clinic, even though he behaved so impudently. Rejoicing at the work done, the boy thought that he was very smart, because he was easily able to save money on food. In the cafe, he also noticed that there were two girls nearby who constantly followed him. The strangers still had to know that he had no money, so they couldn't do anything with him. This situation even pleased the young man, because he understood that he had been spied on for more than 2 days. Continuing to walk further down the street, the hero thought that now he had enough money for food and drink for a while. The next step was to carry out the assignment that the master left him. Approaching one of the passers-by, the guy decided to find out if the man knew where the Chongqing Medical Center was located, but unfortunately, he had not heard of such a thing. The young man did not want to give up, and approached people further, asking where this medical center was located, but no one knew about it. None of the passers-by could give an answer to where exactly the mysterious medical center was located. Sighing heavily, after many attempts, the hero did not understand whether he would be able to carry out the instructions that the master had previously given him. At this rate, he realized that he would soon be spending the night on the street if he couldn't do anything. Turning to the lady, the young man hoped that in this way he could still find out where the medical facility was located. The girl's reaction was unpredictable, because she did not understand why she was called lady, and this literally infuriated her, and she said that the stranger had his entire family as ladies. Having insulted the main character, the stranger left without telling where the institution was located. Meanwhile, a stranger who was smoking nearby was watching everything that was happening. Seeing that a guy passing by was looking for the Chongqing Medical Center, he still decided that it was necessary to help him. As it turned out, the mysterious man knew where this building was and asked the young man to go with him because he wanted to show him the way. A few minutes later, they walked together to the car, and the stranger invited the hero to get into it so that they could get to the medical center. At first, this caused concern for the guy, and he began to think about whether he really should get into the car. Feeling anxious and stressed, the young man decided to find out how much money he would have to pay to get him there. Fortunately, the stranger was kind and said that it would be necessary to give only 20 yuan for fuel. Thus, they nevertheless set off on the journey to the medical center so that the main character could follow the master's instructions. During the trip, the guy had doubts about whether he really needed to pay 20 yuan, because this money was very important for him, because he could not earn it so easily and suffered from it. Some time later, the man exclaimed that they had arrived, but the young man was surprised that the trip went very quickly and he did not see a hospital nearby. As it turned out, this building was his medical center. They just moved 2 years ago and built a hotel here. You can find out the details from the owner of the hotel. These words made the hero angry, because he understood that the man was a deceiver and had brought him to the wrong place. The taxi driver said that this city is really very big, and he is not obliged to know where exactly they moved, which is why he said that first the guy needs to pay, after which he can leave. Feeling hatred for the taxi driver, the guy nevertheless decided to go to the building in order to understand whether they could really tell him where to find the necessary building. Upon entering the room, the young man immediately greeted the manager who was sitting at the table. The woman immediately developed a genuine interest, and she decided to find out if he really wanted to stay with them for the night. This behavior was unusual for the hero, and he said that he actually came to find out where the Chongqing Medical Center is now located. The persistent woman continued to talk about how it was very dangerous late at night and he should stay the night, and tomorrow she was going to tell him everything. Asked for the cost of an overnight stay, the manager said that it was quite cheap and would cost only 40 yuan per night. Hearing about such an amount, it was literally robbery for the main character, because he only had 100 yuan before, and he had already spent some of it. Falling to his knees, he started screaming that it was too expensive to find a damn clinic. Realizing that this was his only chance, Biyun Tao still decided to agree, but asked Madam not to lie to him, because tomorrow morning she must tell him the address of the medical center. Winking at the young man, the woman also offered to buy a massage service from them for 300 yuan, as well as food for 100 yuan. Biyun Tao had no money at all, and exclaimed that he did not need it, saying that the main thing for him was to spend the night. Embarrassed, the administrator was surprised that the guy was being modest, because she understood that he was just pretending to be a chicken, because she knew what a man really wanted. Returning to her workplace, the woman began to ask the young man what his name was, and wrote it down. Thus, He could take a card from the room, and his room was on the second floor, which he needed to find himself. Meanwhile, the sisters continued to monitor the young man, and were amazed that he really arrived at such a strange hotel. Looking at this establishment, the girls wondered if this guy really came to the hotel just to sleep. For them, this man was now very disgusting, but for the sake of the hospital, they were ready to do anything. Suddenly, one of the sisters had an idea, and she still realized something. Immediately after this, they moved to the hotel in order to still meet with the mysterious doctor. The manager was actually very surprised that 2 more people arrived, but she was very happy about it. Having put the money on the table, one of the sisters decided to ask which room the guy who had just arrived was in, and without hesitation, the worker said that he was now in room 204. The girl felt great shame from such questions, and decided to find out if they could still get into this room. From the look of the hotel worker, it was clear that they could really join the main character in room 204. They did all this for a reason, because they had a plan that they were going to implement. The wily little sister wanted to call the police before Bi-Yun-Tao found out. The police would arrest him, and they would take him away from there, and then he would follow them since they helped him. According to In-air, such a bad idea could only have occurred to her sister, and yet the girl decided to find out why she was taking off her shoes. Meanwhile, Bi-Yun-Tao was very glad that he was now lying on the bed, because he knew that he would not have to sleep on the street today, and yet 40 yuan was not a waste of money. Unexpectedly, someone decided to knock on the young man's room. This caused dissatisfaction in the guy, because he didn't understand who could be knocking on the room so late, because he had just gone to bed. Opening the door, Bi-Yun-Tao found a girl who greeted him and told him that her name was Lin Lin. For the hero, this was a truly unexpected turn of events, and he was literally shocked by what was happening. At the same time, the sisters continued to implement their plan and acted slowly. The 2 girls tried with all their might to hide, and moved deftly, hiding around the corner. While answering Lin Lin, Bi-Yun-Tao still noticed that again 2 strangers were watching him, and they were really bothering him. Continuing with her plan, In-air still decided to call the police to summon them to this hotel. Sis understood that doing such things was not good for them, but they could still take him away from the site. Besides, this is what he deserved. A few minutes later, the young man decided to take a shower in order to calm down a little and think. Thinking about the current situation, he understood that otherwise they would deceive him for tens of dollars. Realizing this, Bi-Yun-Tao also realized that he was now in a trap, and only with the help of a single action would it be possible to get out of it. Taking out his phone, the boy without hesitation called the police so that they could help him in such a difficult situation. As it turned out, one person told police that someone was looking for services, another said that he was trapped. These 2 people were in the same place, which is why the police were at a loss. The driver of the police car exclaimed that once they arrived, they would know everything immediately, and there was no need to worry about it looking strange. After making the call to the police, only 5 minutes passed, and the police car was already near the hotel. Getting out of the car, the girl shouted that she was going to room 204, and ordered her charges to go around everything and find suspicious people. It was Fangjing, Jiangnan Police Department. Soon, events continued to happen in room 204, where Bi-Yun-Tao wanted to talk to Lin Lin and not do anything else. This behavior angered the girl, because she did not understand why he behaved this way, because before it seemed to her that she knew what all men wanted. All this time, Fang Jing was listening to the conversation and did not understand what was really happening there. Having knocked down the door, the police officer shouted at everyone not to move and to stand still. The current situation was really not in favor of the main character, and he understood this, because now everything looks as if he is to blame. Turning around, the young man was surprised, because he saw something very unusual, which surprised him extremely. Namely, a very beautiful police girl, and this was truly unusual. Suspecting nothing, the boy began to move towards the policewoman, saying that she was just in time. But he still had no idea that Fang Jing had arrived precisely to arrest him. Carrying out her official duties, the policewoman shouted for the guy not to move, and quickly turned to the wall. Feeling very angry, the girl insisted that the criminal cooperate with her. Not understanding what was happening, Bi-Yun-Tao still wanted to find out what was going on and why he was being told to turn to the wall. The desire to ask a question angered Fang Jing even more, and she ordered not to ask anything, and only do what she says. In fact, such a request could not be fulfilled, because the guy did not understand how this was possible, because he was not allowed to move, but somehow he had to turn towards the wall. Looking straight into Bi Yuntao's eyes, Fang Jing decided to find out if he really didn't want to cooperate. Apologizing to the guy for his rudeness, the girl began to swing her leg with all her might in order to strike. Everything that is happening is even more evil for the hero, because he did not understand whether the police can really just beat people. Without waiting to be hit, Bi Yuntao stopped the policewoman because he couldn't let her hit him. Continuing the dialogue, the guy asked the police that if there is something to say, then you should say it, but not beat people. Watching everything happen, Lin Lin was amazed that this kid could fight with the police. Walking through the building, the police went up to the floor where the events took place and discussed how Sister Fang was irritated today, as was her driving. Suddenly, one policeman turned around and noticed that two girls were sitting nearby. Looking at them, the men immediately realized that these were the same suspicious guys because of whom the police were called. Meanwhile, the fight continued, and Fang Jing was amazed that Bi Yuntao was so strong. Feeling angry, the girl began to shout that she was warning that this was an attack on a policeman, and demanded that she be released immediately. Confused, the young man nevertheless decided to let the girl go, because he understood that in this case he was wrong. The policewoman was still very angry and wanted to finish what she started by apprehending the criminal. Because of this, she again swung her leg with all her might in order to deal a crushing blow to the villain. The young man, in bewilderment, could only watch what was happening, because he did not understand what the police needed from him. Fortunately, Bi Yuntao was able to stop the blow to the girl the second time, realizing that he did not deserve it. These events had already begun to anger the hero, and he still wanted to find out why they wanted to beat him. The angry young man decided that the fight should continue and wanted to strike back. After which, Bi Yuntao threw the policewoman with all his might in order to take revenge on her for trying to beat an innocent person. In fact, the girl just fell on the bed, but still began to experience unbearable pain because she injured her arm during the fall. The cunning hero decided to completely humiliate the policewoman and literally sat on her, asking if she liked this. Embarrassed that she was losing, the girl blushed and ordered to get off her. A few minutes later, Fang Jing began to convulse, experiencing intense anger, screaming that the guy attacking her was a pervert. Looking at everything that was happening, Lin Lin could not understand how this was possible, and why her former client allowed himself such insolence. The young man understood that if he let the police go, she would continue to beat him again. No way. All this time, Bi Yuntao could not understand why the police in this city were so unfriendly. At the same time, Fang Jing's partners interrogated the two girls, because it was because of them that the second call to the police was made. The excited sisters began to make excuses, saying that they had nothing to do with it at all. As soon as they all entered the room together, they were simply shocked by what was happening on the bed. From this sight, their eyes literally began to pop out of their sockets, and their surprise knew no bounds. The partner, seeing what was happening, shouted for the stranger to get off her, because this was really an attack on a policeman. The boy immediately decided to say that it was the policewoman who started beating him as soon as she saw him, and he was simply defending himself. This situation made Fang Jing even more angry, and she was literally going to kill the young man for disgracing her in front of everyone. Unexpectedly, one of the sisters noticed that the other girl in this room was not feeling well. And this was really so, because Lin Lin literally began to choke and did not move. The stranger began to have severe convulsions and began to foam at the mouth. All these symptoms were associated with the fact that she was having a seizure. The determined girl exclaimed that her partner should immediately call an ambulance. Suddenly, the girl and the boy said that they could examine Lin Lin, but the little sister turned out to be a doctor. Fang Jing was surprised at this turn of events, because she didn't understand what a qualified doctor was doing here. After which, a girl named Lin Shui decided to show her ID to finally prove that she was actually a doctor. While looking at the ID, the police saw that the girl worked at the Lin Medical Center. The young man was very surprised that there were several medical centers in this city, and In Er was amazed that he did not know about the hospital. Their Lin Hospital is a trusted institution, and also the best hospital in the city. Although they are the second hospital in terms of visitors, there is no better hospital in Jiangnan than theirs. It turned out that Lin Lin had epilepsy, as well as mild heart disease, although Lin Shui was scared, but she saw that there was an epileptic in front of her now. Looking at the girl who was shaking from illness, the young man understood that if they sent her to the hospital now, her life would be in danger. The determined guy exclaimed that the doctor should move away from the patient so that he could help her. The policewoman did not even want to listen to the unqualified person, because she understood that there was an excellent doctor nearby who could help the patient. Suddenly, Lin Shui exclaimed that before the ambulance arrived, she wanted to see treatment from Biyun Tao. For the girl, this was a truly shocking statement, because she had no idea how this rogue could help the patient. Looking at the girl, the young man realized that he could not use some medications for her symptoms. The alarmed police officers shouted at the guy not to do anything, otherwise he would be in big trouble if he did something wrong. Nevertheless, the hero began to act, and began to take out medicines from his bag, which he had saved specifically for such a diagnosis. This medicine was medicinal needles in order to perform acupuncture. Having taken out the needles, the young man was already preparing to perform the procedure in order to do everything for the patient to survive. For those watching what was happening, this was truly unusual, because they had no idea how an epileptic seizure could be cured with the help of acupuncture. After moistening the needle with saliva, Biyun Tao prepared for acupuncture and was about to begin the procedure. The qualified doctor was simply shocked, because this guy used his saliva to disinfect the needle. The first needle was injected directly into the head. Although the patient was trembling greatly, it was still necessary to help her. The boy tried his best not to harm the girl, and to do acupuncture carefully so that she would survive. From the very first prick of this needle, the girl literally jumped up and began screaming with all her might. Such a sight was truly unpleasant, and the little sisters began to close their eyes so as not to see how Lin was suffering. The closely watching police also did not understand what this guy was doing and simply continued to watch what was happening. Suddenly, Biyun Tao began to swing his arm as if he wanted to punch with all his might. And it really was a blow that was aimed directly at the girl's head, so that the treatment would be even more effective. Experiencing severe pain, the girl continued to tremble, and there was perspiration on her face. Having come to her senses, Lin began to scream from the pain she experienced due to the strong blow against the wall. The doctor herself could not believe that it really worked, and that a patient in terrible condition had just been cured of an epileptic seizure. Sighing with relief, the young man exclaimed, "There are no more problems, and now he should be given 20 yuan for medical expenses." Everyone who was present in this room was simply dumbfounded, because they could not imagine how it was possible to cure at least someone in this way. Lin Shui immediately started screaming, because she wanted to know how Biyun Tao was able to do this. At the same time, Fang Jing decided to ask her uncle if the people present here were arrested. In fact, the man was a fan of this decision, that it was necessary to forget about everything that happened here, because if they did not have enough evidence, then their team could suffer. This decision made the police extremely angry, and she shouted that Biyun Tao was clearly a scoundrel, and he urgently needed to be detained. This angered the hero even more, and he shouted that he was being bullied, and that he was not guilty of anything at all, and that the policewoman really needed to go to the hospital because she was crazy. Looking at the boy, the uncle exclaimed that he was in vain saying all this, because now he would be in big trouble. Getting even more angry, Fang Jing immediately decided to approach the impudent guy to explain to him the current situation. The incredibly aggressive girl came incredibly close and exclaimed that she could now talk to him and asked him to leave his phone number so that they could contact him in the future. This kind of moral pressure had absolutely no effect on Biyun Tao, and he didn't understand at all who could be afraid of this girl, which is why he was going to give her his phone number. Events continued to happen the next morning. The hero decided to ask the administrator where Chongqing Hospital was located. Yawning with a desire to sleep, the woman exclaimed that this city was very large, and she did not know where its hospital was. Thus, Biyun Tao again realized that he had been deceived and would not be told where this hospital actually was. Leaving the hotel, the young man kept thinking that when he found Chongqing Hospital, he would definitely not be deceived there. Watching the girls pass by, Biyun was truly surprised that there were so many beauties in this city. Surprisingly, as soon as the stranger approached the guy, she immediately invited him to have dinner together. This turn of events clearly surprised the hero, because he did not expect such a beautiful lady to approach him. Looking around, he decided to see if she was really addressing him. After which, Biyun Tao still decided to ask again whether the girl was really telling him. Angrily watching her interlocutor, Fang Jing wanted to know if he really forgot her so quickly. Without thinking twice, the young man began to remember that he seemed to have seen her somewhere, but could not remember where exactly. Unable to bear it, the lady shouted that they had only met at the hotel yesterday. Immediately after this, for clarity, she decided to tie her hair in a ponytail, in order to show that it was in this form that the hero liked her. Watching the girl closely, the young man gradually began to remember who he had met. As soon as he remembered, he exclaimed with all his might that this girl was the policewoman he had ridden yesterday evening. Such an association immediately angered the interlocutor, because she did not expect that the young man would remember her precisely because of this. She got even angrier, which is why she started strangling the innocent guy and covering his mouth with her hands, saying that they had not finished the conversation yet. Still, Fang Jing decided to spare the guy and wanted to invite him to dinner, but he, in turn, believed that if she did this, absolutely nothing would change. Some time later, they reached the restaurant, and were going to have dinner in this particular place. As soon as the couple entered, employees of the establishment immediately greeted them, inviting them inside. Looking at the entire surrounding situation, the young man understood that he could not afford it. I turned to the girl. He decided to tell me that it was expensive for him, and suggested going to a small restaurant to have a snack there. Smiling, at this time the girl thought that this guy is not so bad, and even wants her to save money. Still, Fang Jing asked the guy not to worry and said that they could eat here. Looking at the menu, the hero was simply dumbfounded by the prices, because he understood that he absolutely did not have that kind of money. The dishes in this restaurant were really very expensive, and there wasn't even a dish under 50 yuan. This reaction was absolutely incomprehensible to the lady, because she was thinking that she would pay the bill herself. Thus, Biyun Tao decided that it was better to let his partner choose the dish in this situation, in order not to take responsibility for it. Some time later, the hero was full, because he had eaten absolutely all the food that they ordered. There were really a lot of different dishes on the table, and all of them were consumed by only one main character. For the companion, this was a truly amazing phenomenon, because she did not understand how long this guy had not eaten. Behaving uncivilly, he began to burp, and decided to ask something. The arrogant guy was very interested in what exactly Fang Jing wanted from him, because he did not believe that she was here to apologize and invite him to dinner. His guess was indeed correct, and there was something else she wanted to tell him. As it turned out, the girl actually needed his help. The street doctor immediately exclaimed that if this was a patient, he was ready to help. The girl decided to answer this question on the way. They say that she parked an electric scooter nearby, and they can ride on it. After which, the girl said that her patient had a very strange disease. I didn't know if she might have transmitted this disease when she was little, because she was sick and weak when she was born. Out of despair, Fang Jing asked many doctors for help, and this really cost a lot of money. But just yesterday, the police saw that Biyun Tao was a rather strange doctor, and perhaps there was some chance that he would help with a difficult diagnosis. In any case, even if such a strange doctor could not cure the patient, Fang Jing still did not intend to blame him for it. Sitting on a scooter, the young man decided to find out what would happen if he could still cure an incurable patient, but the girl initially did not want to answer this question. In order not to fall while riding, the hero clung his hands to his companion with all his might, and this embarrassed her very much, because the grip was very strong. Suddenly, the girl exclaimed that if the doctor could not help the patient, then she would kill him, and for the young man this was a really strange statement, because earlier she had said that she would not blame him. Some time later, they finally arrived at the required building, where the sick girl was staying. The determined Fang Jing asked Biyun Tao to try hard. If he could cure his sister, then she would thank him for it. Without hesitating for a moment, the boy exclaimed that if he could cure his sister, he would like his companion to become his wife. This request really surprised the lady, because she did not expect the street doctor to be so impudent. For a high-ranking girl, such a union was unacceptable. In addition, she believed that the doctor most likely would not be able to cure her sister's illness, because he had no idea how many doctors had tried to cure her over the years. That's why Fang Jing wanted to know if she could be sure that the young man could help her. Looking at the doormat, the girl noticed that there were indeed a lot of shoes, and her uncle must also be in the apartment. Knocking on the door, the aunt opened it and said that this time her uncle had specially hired a very good doctor from the city, and now her sister's illness would definitely be curable. Auntie also noticed that some unfamiliar guy was standing not far from the girl, but Fang Jing said that he was just her friend. Nevertheless, the aunt decided to let them inside the apartment, and the young man began to look around to take a closer look at the apartment. Meanwhile, the doctor examined the patient and said that her condition was much worse than he had expected. The girl's worried parents wanted to know if the doctor could help cure such a difficult patient. The determined doctor said that he was very sorry for this girl, because cold poison had entered her body, and this was a rather serious problem. From such a statement, Fang Jing began to panic, and shouted that if there was a way to save her sister, then she was ready to do anything for this. Uncle also wanted to help with all his might, and said that his niece did not know how much she suffered and how tired she was over the years to cure her sister. Because of this, he decided to give money to the doctor so that he could definitely cure his little sister. The lightning-fast cunning man hid the money in his pocket and said that the owners of the house were really very kind to him, and he didn't mean that he really couldn't cure it. But still, the man decided to tell something about the disease. Namely, that their sister's illness is caused by congenital chills, and in China there is no treatment for this disease. Recently, the doctor received news from friends that in the USA there is a medicine that treats this disease, because of which it is necessary to go and be treated in America. After treatment in America, perhaps the little girl's illness will be cured. Hearing this, Fang Jing immediately began to panic, because she understood that this was indeed very expensive. The uncle also began to shout at his niece, saying that she should pay as much as necessary, and there was no doubt, because there was already a qualified doctor, and he would definitely be able to cure her little sister. As I watched everything that was happening, the young man understood that the girl's uncle was really bad. Out of despair, Fang Jing began to say that if they decided to make money because of her illness, then she herself would take her sister and find her a doctor herself, but her uncle and aunt said that this could no longer continue, and they will take care of the treatment themselves. Unable to bear such a conversation, with the last of her strength the girl exclaimed that they did not have that kind of money, and they could not pay for such an expensive treatment. Coming closer, Fan began to tell her beloved sister that she was rich, and she should not worry, because her sister now works in the police, and the annual salary and bonuses are a lot of money. The evil aunt came closer and began to talk about how Fang Lin really shouldn't worry, because her sister was promising, and she was doing a great job at such a young age. Because of this, the arrogant relatives were sure that Fang Lin would easily be sent to America for treatment. Suddenly, my uncle saw that some unfamiliar guy was standing nearby, and he wanted to find out who came to the house. Realizing that this was his chance, Biyun Tao exclaimed that he had come to cure Fang Lin. This event caused anxiety in the aunt, and she wanted to know if the young man in front of her was really a doctor. I understand that it is necessary to protect my comrade. Fang Jing said that he is actually her friend, and knows a little medicine, which is why she asked to help examine Fang Lin. Mentally, the girl understood that she was afraid that even Biyun Tao could not do anything in this situation. Grabbing the guy, the determined sister called him to examine the patient and see if he could do something to cure her. Dr. Zhang also did not mind the examination. It is said that young people can take a look. By observing difficult-to-treat diseases, one can improve medical skills. Now some doctors who graduated from medical schools are as good as some sole doctors. They are bad in medicine only because they lack experience in diagnosing clinical cases. Smiling at the doctor, the uncle and aunt began to confirm this, saying that they were indeed right. The concerned girl, turning to the hero, said that now he had heard about the situation with her sister, and did not know whether he could help with treatment, but still did not blame him if he could not help. Looking directly into her eyes, the young man turned to Officer Fan, asking if she really believed what the doctor told her. Initially, Fang Jing did not understand what the guy meant. He only decided to ask where her sister's room was. The room was very close, but initially, the worried girl wanted to find out why Biyun needed all this. In order to realize whether the diagnosis is really correct, first of all, the guy decided to go inside the room in order to examine the situation. First, he decided to look in the wardrobe to make sure there was nothing suspicious there. Coming closer to the bed, the guy began to smell it in order to understand if everything was okay. These actions were strange, which is why Fang Jing still decided to find out what this strange doctor was doing. As it turned out, the hero still understood what was going on and wanted to examine Fang Lin in order to give her the correct diagnosis. Alarmed, the girl agreed that the doctor could examine her, but only asked him not to do anything. All this time, my uncle and aunt were watching them and wondering what they were muttering about. The confident young man said that there is no need to worry in this situation, because he knows what to do. After all, in fact, he understood everything by looking at her face, because Fong Lin does not have the cold poison disease at all. This statement surprised Fong Jing even more, and she wanted to find out what kind of disease it was. Immediately after this, she decided to ask the guy again, asking if he was really sure that he was telling the truth. Realizing that Dr. Zhang had previously given a different diagnosis, Fan was still confused and did not understand who to believe, but Bi Yuntao continued to convince her, saying that he was never wrong. Suddenly, the evil uncle exclaimed that they had already agreed that Fong Lin would go abroad for treatment, which is why he wanted to know if Fong Jing was willing to give the money, because the doctor said that about 60,000 yuan was needed. Such a sum was simply impressive for the girl, and she clearly did not understand where she could get so much money from. Also, Fong Jing bowed her head and simply said that she understood everything. At the same time, Bi Yuntao began to shout with all his might that her sister did not need to go abroad, because it was not cold poison at all, and it would definitely cure Fong Lin. This statement made all the relatives, as well as the doctor, worry, because they understood that their lies could now be revealed. Feeling intense anger towards this guy, they only wanted to find out who this so-called friend really was. Everyone present was angry with the main character and they ordered him not to talk nonsense because he is not a doctor and his medical skills cannot be better than that of a qualified doctor. The brave young man exclaimed that he never really says anything stupid, and the doctor should know what kind of illness the patient really has. The doctor's student was against such statements because he believed that the guy in front of him could never become the best doctor in the world like his teacher. Some time later, the hero decided to approach Fong Lin and said that he just wanted to ask her a few questions related to her illness. He only asked her to answer all questions absolutely honestly and not be embarrassed by him. The first question was how old was the girl. As it turned out, she was 15 years old. Immediately after this, the street doctor decided to ask if she had menstruated before. This question confused the girl very much, and she began to shake her head, saying that she had never menstruated. Watching everything happen, Dr. Zhang knew that this guy was asking the right questions related to the disease. Perspiration began to appear on the man's forehead because he was nervous, because he understood that perhaps this child was really a doctor. At the same time, the young man asked Fong Lin for his hand in order to examine it. Examining the girl's hand, the young man noticed that she had a very strange bruise, which is why he decided to ask the doctor what it was. Trying to justify himself, the man said that this is the Yanqi point, it is used in Chinese medicine. This was indeed the case, but in this case, the young man was wondering whether the doctor had really not noticed that Fong Lin's Yangqi point was a little different from ordinary people. This statement made Zhang even more nervous, because the unqualified doctor was very close to the answer. The alarmed doctor shouted that Fong Lin's Yangqi point would be a little stronger than the others. This is because the girl's body is too cold, which causes the blood flow to be blocked. Nevertheless, the uncle decided to calm the doctor down, because he saw that the situation was getting out of control. The young man could not stand it and shouted that he did not think that Dr. Zhang was capable and self-possessed enough, which is why he needed to stop being a doctor in the future. And he needs to stop being a doctor only in order not to harm other patients. This angered the doctor's student even more, and he wanted to ask Bi Yuntao what he could understand about medicine. Because, according to his partner, no one can insult his teacher, even if it is the king of heaven, and he will never forgive such a person. Unable to tolerate this, Bi Yuntao decided to act and squeeze the scoundrel's hand with all his might. The defeated assistant began to scream with all his might to be let go, because he was in hellish pain. Looking at the imperfect fight, Auntie knew that Wu Fong Jing's friend was indeed very cruel. The young man first decided to ask the assistant if he really wanted to continue this argument, but he only talked about letting him go as soon as possible because he was in pain. The hero was really very kind, which is why he let the scoundrel go, and in turn the scoundrel thought about where this skinny monkey got so much strength. The good-natured Bi Yuntao turned to Fong Lin, saying that little brother was here to cure her. Embarrassed, the girl was shaking because of her illness, and realized that it was literally impossible to cure her. Meanwhile, the guy came even closer and said that everything would be fine and she shouldn't worry. First, he decided to examine her hand, after which he asked if she was ready for treatment. As soon as the girl agreed, the young man immediately pressed her Yanqi point, which was on her hand. This action immediately caused hellish pain in the baby, and she did not understand why it really hurt so much. Fortunately, This pain was not something to be afraid of, because it would get better later, so you should endure it. The smart hero continued to act and did everything to help his patient. Mocking, the doctor said that there was no point in trying to help her, because Bi-yun Tao could only make things worse. In order to complete the treatment, the experienced doctor, using traditional medicine, began to massage the Yangqi point, which caused Fang Lin to develop a fever. The girl literally started trying to catch her breath in order to cool her body, because she was very hot. Watching her little sister, Fang Jing literally couldn't believe her eyes, because she didn't understand how this was possible. At the same time, the doctor saw that the patient was really getting much better. Everyone present in the room was literally in shock because the girl began to sweat, although earlier she had been very cold. Now her Yanqi point had to be cured, and massage helped in getting rid of the fictitious diagnosis. Continuing to massage his hand, Bi-yun Tao decided to find out how the girl was feeling and whether she was still cold. Laughing, Fan Lin exclaimed that she was no longer cold at all, on the contrary, she was even very warm, which is why she immediately decided to thank her savior. Relatives and doctors just continued to watch, hoping that the treatment would not work. A joyful Fang Jing ran up to her little sister and wanted to know if she really felt better. As it turns out, Lin is indeed no longer cold, but now there is another problem. Due to the treatment done, the girl was now very hot, which also bothered her. Jing was very surprised by this statement because she didn't understand what was causing the heat to be so intense. Alarmed, the girl immediately began asking the doctor what was the matter and why her sister felt hot. Rejoicing at this outcome of events, the doctor began to say that the amateur should not have interfered in this matter, because he had caused even more problems. At this reaction from the doctor, the hero only laughed, saying that he was behaving like a scoundrel. Also, Bi-yun Tao did not waste time on the insult, and also called the scoundrel an old man. Coming closer to the guy, the old man began to shout that this boy with a dirty mouth was never taught to treat elders well, and in general he could not cure the patient. Bi-yun Tao began to be lazy in answering the scoundrel, and simply asked him to take a look at the girl so that he could make sure that she was now healthy. Because all that needed to be done in this situation was to take off warm clothes so that the girl would not be so hot. Thus, the villain had to properly convince himself that the hero was indeed a good doctor. This even embarrassed the impudent man, because he could not imagine that such a young guy would be able to cure such a complex diagnosis. With the last of his strength, the old man shouted that he simply had not reacted for a while, and knew that this could also be done in order to cure the girl. Nevertheless, together they decided to leave, because they really did not like this doctor who was able to cure Fang Lin. At the same time, uncle and aunt looked at each other and realized that it was necessary to act. Immediately after that, they ran to the door and said that they would see Dr. Zhang through. Bi-yun Tao still understood that they were up to something, and it was necessary to help this family to the end in order to save them from the problem. Suddenly, Fang Jing turned to the young man, saying that he was amazing, or she decided to find out how he did it. Now her little sister will no longer have any problems. It was something like a cold. She just had an illness that was very neglected due to the fact that no one was treating it. Thanks to this statement, Fang Jing realized that these were cold poison diseases. Confused, the sister still wanted to know why the hero asked such strange questions from Lin. In fact, the question about menstruation was brought up only because it was because of the cold that her menstruation was delayed. The cold and her second illness still have something in common, and they began to merge, which is why her fear of the cold became so strong. The lady realized that this was why the doctor was examining her sister's room to detect the presence of the disease. And also, the young man understood that this disease was not incurable. And it is completely unclear why the doctor regarded this as an invasion of cold poison into the body. For him to tell Fang Jing such nonsense really looks very suspicious. These words literally made the girl think about what she had believed for so long. This whole situation caused incredible anger because she now realized that her relatives and the doctor were liars. Suddenly, behind her, Fang Lin turned to her brother, who had just helped her. The joyful girl said that she was definitely fine now, but still wanted to know if she would be able to go to school soon. It will actually be possible to go to school, because her brother will prescribe her medicine, and in a couple of days she will be able to go to school. However, if she can fully recover, she will need to lie down for another half a month and take a special medicine. Some time later, the doctor prepared a prescription for the medicine and also wrote all the details on a piece of paper. The medicine must be used strictly as he wrote, Fang Jing even thought that this prescription was written by a professional doctor. Due to the fact that the patient did not need anything else, the doctor realized that he could now go. Suddenly, his sister stopped him, because she realized that she had not paid him for the treatment done. Laughing, the young man refused the money, saying that the girl had previously treated him to a delicious dinner and she did not need to pay. This answer confused the girl even more. She was literally ashamed of her behavior earlier. A little embarrassed, she still decided to find out the name of the main character, because she had not done this before. But this question already angered the guy, because they even went to dinner, and she still didn't remember his name. The professional street doctor shouted that you should listen to him carefully and remember his name, because his name is Biyun Tao. After waving his hand, the boy decided to say goodbye, because the girls made him extremely angry. The behavior on the part of the hero really embarrassed my little sister, and she literally blushed. And this only made the officer laugh, because she understood what kind of character this boy had. Suddenly, Biyun Tao came out from around the corner and turned to the officer, saying that he had something to do. This statement made the girl very alarmed, but she still wanted to find out what happened. Immediately she began to say that she would not cover him for crimes, and also would not help him with money. But in reality, he just wanted to ask something, because after all, the police should know more than ordinary people, and the question was how to get to Chongqing Hospital. This kind of question really surprised the officer, because she didn't understand why he needed to know this, and immediately thought that Biyun Tao was going to take revenge for something. Not understanding why he should take revenge, the hero had no grudges against this hospital, and only wanted to know where it was. Still, the girl decided to tell her that the two ladies from yesterday were from Chongqing Hospital. Coming closer, Fang Jing first said that the young man was literally obsessed with these two girls, and she knew that he was a scoundrel, but obviously they were both deceiving him. The worried boy did not understand how this was possible, because he knew that the two girls from yesterday were from the Lin Medical Center. As it turns out, Lin Medical Center was previously called Chongqing, but the word Chongqing greatly influences people's opinions. It's like something immortal. Therefore, the Jiangnan city government ordered them to change their name to become the current Lin Hospital. Some time later, the young man decided to go to Lin Hospital, where he had wanted to go for so long. The taxi driver told the boy that they were there, and were now on the innermost part of the alley of the Lin Medical Center. But the man also decided to warn Biyun Tao because seeing a doctor here is very expensive, and they don't treat minor illnesses, so it's not worth going there unless he has serious problems. Soon after, the taxi driver said that the fare would cost 40 yuan, and the young man held out the last of his money with trembling hands. Sighing heavily, the hero realized that now he was completely left without money, and he had nothing to live on. But one day the teacher told him something, namely, that the owner of the Lin Medical Center is obliged to help him, which is why the hero hoped that everything would go smoothly, because he had been walking to this hospital for so long. Laughing, he thought about what kind of facial expression those beauties would have when they saw him. Suddenly, behind me, a girl was driving her car and honking her horn, because she wanted the stupid boy to get off the road. The stranger continued to honk incessantly, because she wanted to be let through. As if nothing had happened, Biyun Tao continued to move forward, and did not want to let the impudent scoundrel pass by. From this behavior on the part of the young man, the girl became even more angry, and did not understand why she was so unlucky. Deciding that this guy should run away anyway, the impudent girl decided to press on the gas in order to drive forward. With incredible speed, the car began to move straight towards the young man, who was frightened by surprise. Jumping aside, he was really glad that he was able to survive in such a difficult situation, because now he could have been shot down. Looking at this girl, he did not understand how it was even possible to do this, because it was not at all human. Feeling very angry, the young man looked at the car and realized that the stranger had first yelled at him and then even wanted to kill him. Getting out of her car, the stranger immediately turned to the hillbilly, saying that such an old woman as she was still capable of beating the insolent person. Watching everything that was happening, the guy was surprised, because this scoundrel came to the hospital, and even drove along a narrow road in an expensive car. Biyun Tao was literally furious because the teacher showed him the courtesy of giving instructions to the owner of the hospital, and he was his direct student. But all the other people behaved like idiots and uneducated scoundrels. Looking at the hospital, the young man did not understand how this was possible, because the hospital looked so big, but it seemed meager. A huge number of people stood nearby. One of the women shouted that her husband was seriously wounded, and he was sent to this terrible hospital. As it turned out, it was the same lady who was driving the car at incredible speed, and she was very indignant that her husband was here. One of the mercenaries said that this was the best hospital that was located near the accident site, and her husband was seriously injured, and he could not help but bring him here. The lady didn't care at all whether it was the best clinic or not, but if her husband didn't get help, she would immediately ask her father to kill the servant. The doctor will also be to blame if he cannot save her husband, because in this case he will also suffer. All this time, the man only observed the patient, who was really seriously wounded, and it is not a fact that he would have survived. Standing behind was Air, who was amazed by everything that was happening and did not understand how to help this patient. The hero immediately recognized the same girl who had previously been at the hotel, and set the police on him. Experiencing severe pain, the man could not even speak, he only screamed from how much pain he was in. A nearby doctor could immediately identify that Mr. Qian had suffered organ displacement and also had multiple fractures. The head of the hospital was still not there, and the doctor was not sure that he could do anything, so he did not dare to treat him. So the doctor decided that they should send him to another hospital because the most qualified doctor was unavailable. This proposal angered the lady even more, and she did not understand how this was possible. People nearby were discussing that with such a serious injury, they were afraid that the patient would die if he was transferred to another hospital, and thought that Lin Hospital was becoming less and less reliable. Feeling very stressed, the woman began to scream that this must be the best Chinese medicine clinic in the city, and yet she wanted to understand which hospital they should go to in this case. The excited man replied that he thought it would be better to transport such a complex patient to a hospital in the capital. Due to the complexity of the situation, it was obvious that the patient would not be able to survive, and the wife understood this. People watching everything that was happening knew that the capital hospital was thousands of miles away, and apparently the doctor was not using his brain to make such decisions. Meanwhile, the woman began to take something out of her purse, and said that real doctors of Chinese medicine would definitely cope when the situation was so critical. He still suggested that she see a doctor in the capital. The fees in this hospital were so high that even the doctors lacked medical skills, which is why all people now understood that it was better to consult a Western doctor. After a short conversation on the phone, the woman shouted that those who practice Chinese medicine are useless trash. After such a statement, the main character felt uneasy, because he was also a doctor of Chinese medicine. Unable to tolerate such behavior, Biyun Tao began to walk through the crowd of people and asked who dares to say that Chinese medicine doctors are trash. Looking at the one who asked to repeat this phrase, the woman immediately shouted for this scoundrel to get out of here, because she doesn't have time to talk to him. Suddenly, Air also noticed that the same guy from the hotel had come here. Coming closer, the young man explained that he was not here to help her with her husband, and he asked for an explanation as to why the girl called all Chinese medicine doctors garbage. Looking at the guy, the woman could not understand how he dared to ask her to explain to him, conditionally, he is her father. Realizing that he couldn't just leave it like that, the young man began to act. Initially, the hero realized that this conversation would be of no use, and immediately began to go to the patient. Sitting down, he immediately began to examine the crippled man, who could not even move. First, Biyun Tao opened the man's pupil to look at him and understand what his current state was. Experiencing severe panic, the woman shouted that this scoundrel should not even come close to her husband, and ordered him to be removed from there. The doctor immediately exclaimed that the boy should not be so reckless, and moved away from this patient as soon as possible. They cavalry because if something goes wrong, they will have to bear responsibility for it. Unexpectedly, Air, after thinking for a while, made a decision and decided to tell the doctor about it. For an older doctor, such a decision was really pointless, because this guy was too young, and this kind of treatment was risky. Still, the girl understood that only this guy could help them at the moment. While examining the patient, the young man did everything possible to determine the necessary actions for treatment. With a serious look, the young guy continued to act, doing everything possible to help his patient. The wife no longer hoped that her husband would be saved in such a difficult situation, but she still understood that she simply had no other choice. The determined guy said that the patient had comminuted fractures, plus he had broken several more ribs, but this problem was minor, and he would cure him in an instant. No one could have expected this statement, and the wife was amazed, because she did not understand how this was even possible. Turning to the guy, she again called him a hillbilly and asked if this was really a small problem, because she thought it was just bullying. Pulling the hero away, she ordered him to get out of here, because she thought that he did not want to help, but was simply stalling for time. Suddenly, In-air shouted that although this guy was not from their clinic, he had excellent medical skills, and he would definitely be able to cure her husband. Looking at the hospital worker, the woman couldn't understand how this boy could even be an excellent doctor, as if In-air's brain had become dull. Today the hero is going to prove what Chinese medicine is really capable of, because previously this woman believed that it was absolutely useless. Narrowing his gaze, the young man decided to ask again if the woman wanted him to treat her husband. Even the driver began to say that everything was very bad with the transfer now. The doctors in this hospital did not dare to treat her husband, and therefore the guy should be given a chance to try this method of treatment. The worried employee asked him to help his boss and put him on his feet, because no one else could save him. After thinking a little, Biyun Tao finally decided how exactly he would act in this situation. First, the boy began to remove the bandage that he had on his shoulder all the time. From it he began to pull out something very unusual, which should help with such a difficult diagnosis. As it turned out, these were acupuncture needles. In this case, they could help the patient survive. The people present saw that these were needles, but they looked so old and dirty, and this guy was a Chinese medicine doctor, but everyone present understood that he was just an ordinary village doctor. Hearing such statements, the young man immediately realized that he definitely needed a quiet and calm room. Fortunately, this was not a problem, and In-air asked to go inside the hospital in order to give her the opportunity to spend some time in silence. Without hesitation, the hero decided to lift the patient in order to move him to a quieter place. Seeing what this guy was doing, In-air was simply furious, because she did not understand how this was possible, because this patient was wounded, and he still decided to raise him. At first, Biyun Tao was really shocked by this reaction and didn't know how to respond. Still, the smart guy smiled and exclaimed that there was no need to worry about this, because he had already thought of everything. Having cried from doubts, the girl nevertheless agreed, although she understood that it was very risky. Turning around, she still wanted to lead the hero into the room so that he could carry out his procedures there. Although in fact, all this was a trap, and In-air mentally apologized to the guy, because the patient could no longer be saved, and it would be better to let all the blame be on the stranger. Because what Lin Hospital cares about most is its reputation, and a deceased patient will have an extremely negative impact on it. Soon the main character will receive good compensation for the current situation, because he will take all the blame on himself. Some time later, they found themselves in the quiet chamber, where there was an opportunity to perform acupuncture. Feeling anxious, Biyun Tao knew that this whole procedure would be very risky, but he was ready to act. Initially, he began to take out needles in order to perform acupuncture. Applying his knowledge, the hero initially began to disinfect the needles by heating them on a candle. Thus, the procedure was begun, and the young man held his breath, after which he prepared to use the first needle. The next needle was aimed straight at the patient's forehead, because all these actions were provided for by acupuncture techniques. Multiple injections were applied directly near the head, and also near the neck. Realizing that this would not be enough, Biyun Tao was determined and wanted to do everything possible to ensure that the patient survived. That's why he took off all his clothes and continued to perform acupuncture on other parts of the body. A few hours later, the patient was literally completely covered in needles because a special Chinese medicine technique was used. Looking at the patient, the hero only laughed and thought that the hospital would still have to pay him for the patient's treatment. Thus, the last step of the procedure remained, which would allow the patient to come to his senses. Using the abilities of a Chinese medicine doctor, Biyun Tao performed the last acupuncture. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in another building of Lin Hospital. The elderly man named Lin Changtian was a doctor at Lin Hospital and also the venerable president of the Jiangnan Medical Association, and he didn't understand why his daughter did this and framed the young doctor. Her sister also did not understand why In-air did this, and framed the main character, because he was not even an employee of their hospital. At the same time, the patient continued to lie immobilized, and the treatment that had previously been prescribed by Biyun Tao worked on him. Suddenly, Madame's dissatisfied father drove up, and she decided to tell him that some hillbilly was now treating her husband. Hearing this, the worried man immediately decided to find out where Lin Changtian was to find out from him what was happening in this hospital. Everyone at the hospital understood that this Qian Ming was the sponsor of the Jiangnan Medical Association, and the key point is that he has a different concept than Lin Changtian, and they are rivals. Entering the hospital, Lin Changtian immediately decided to say hello to the impudent man, but he did not dare to formalize, and wanted to find out where his son was. Immediately, the head of the hospital realized that it was the son of the philanthropist who was now being treated by an unknown guy. Turning to the girls, the man immediately asked that Lin Changtian be escorted to his son. Feeling guilty, Yin Er exclaimed that she would immediately bring them so that they could meet. Feeling very anxious, the girl did not know what to expect in the ward, but she only hoped for the best. The father of the injured guy wanted to know who the attending physician is now at their hospital. Not knowing how to respond to this, Lin Shui only said that this is Yin Er's friend, who is currently treating a seriously ill patient. Feeling very angry, Lin Changtian again asked to repeat what was just said. After all, he could not understand how Yin Er's friend was even involved in the patient's treatment. The victim's wife decided to butt into the conversation, saying that the attending physician at the moment was a hillbilly who was about 20 years old. This infuriated the powerful man even more, and he was literally furious. Lin Changtian began to shout, saying that his enemy was really good, because he did not expect that they would spread the grievances of the medical association to his son. But if something happened to his son, their clinic would never open again, because the influential Changtian was ready to do everything possible for this. Still, Lin Shui couldn't help but shout that Lin Changtian was a bald donkey, and the old man was not afraid to cure his son. Moreover, their son would not be harmed in this clinic. Both elderly men could not accept the insults, and began to shout at each other, sorting out the relationship between themselves. Feeling very angry at each other, the men almost began to fight, because each of them believed that he was the one who was right. The screaming continued, each of them wanted war, and were going to do everything possible to ensure that their business would never open again. Suddenly, someone nearby began to leave the office in order to find out what was happening outside. As it turned out, it was the main character, and yet he wanted to find out what the noise was not far from his office. Seeing him, the sisters began to panic, because they understood that if Lin Changtian saw the guy now, he would be furious. In fact, the hero came out to say that he should not be distracted, because he almost stuck a needle there. Each of those present, seeing the guy, began to get even angrier, realizing that this brat could not do anything useful, much less cure someone. Fortunately, the procedure was already over, and the young man began to leave the office, after which the wife and father of the wounded guy began to run inside. The elderly man looked at Bi Yuntao and let him know that if he did not cure his son, then he would be in trouble. Seeing this guy, Lin Shui was simply shocked, because he understood that now there was a child in front of him, and Lin Shui did not understand why he was here at all, and took up treatment. Feeling very tired, the young man began to realize that he needed to rest first, and yet, with his hand, he indicated that everything was fine with the patient. The alarmed head of the hospital asked his subordinate to hurry to the patient and examine him. Sitting down nearby, Bi Yuntao began to repeat that he had previously heard that they charge a lot for treatment here, and for such injuries, they should pay him a lot. Entering the office, the man's father and wife did not understand how this was even possible, because looking at this patient, it was noticeable that overall everything was fine with him. The experienced doctor who was the head of the hospital saw that this technique was special. From the placement of the needles, it could be determined that it was a 9-revolving life needle technique. But still, he couldn't understand how such a guy could have such skills, because he was still too young and didn't look so smart. After examining the patient, the doctors concluded that his pulse was stable and his breathing was also smooth. Now his life is no longer in danger, even the fractures were removed, and incredible work was done. Even the doctor admitted that this young man is truly amazing and he has done an incredibly difficult job. Watching his son, Lin Changtian couldn't believe it, because his injury was indeed serious, but the young guy was somehow able to heal him. Looking at the girl, Changtian asked her to tell the doctor to bring equipment to confirm that his son was okay. However, his life does not seem to be in danger, which means that his statement was incorrect, but still, Lin Changtian did not understand whether Chinese medicine could really have such a high level. Meanwhile, Lin Shui decided to contact the hero to tell him how good the treatment was. Coming closer, the elderly man noted that the young man was really doing well. At the same time, the boy's phone rang, and he understood that it was necessary to answer this call. The tired young man decided to say that he was receiving a call, which is why he urgently needed to answer the call. Stepping aside, he immediately began talking on the phone in order to find out why they were calling him. Lin Shui decided to tell Lin Shui how much the guy did a great job, and how exactly he was able to help the patient. This literally discouraged the girl, because she had no idea that such a cool guy was now in front of her. Suddenly, the hero was told over the phone that he was a charlatan, which is why he wanted to go and deal with it. Putting the phone in his pocket, Biyun Tao understood that he needed to prove that he was not a charlatan, but a true doctor. Apologizing to the elder, he said that he had a small problem, which is why he needed to leave. Suddenly, he turned around as if he wanted to say something to Lin Shui about what the teacher had told him earlier. Nevertheless, anger overcame the young man, and he exclaimed that he should forget about it for now, and he would tell only when he returned. Realizing that such a worker should not be lost, Lin Shui began to act. He immediately asked his daughter not to sit still, but to follow this guy, because she had to return him to this hospital. With all his might, the hero shouted that he was not a charlatan, and today he would prove it again. His running speed was really impressive because he was trying his best to get to another hospital. But gradually fatigue overcame him, and he began to stop, because he could no longer run so fast. As soon as the young man stopped completely, he began to think about how he should proceed further. Soon, turning around, he shouted with all his might that he didn't know this damn city, and where he should go next. He also had no money at all, which is why he couldn't even call a taxi. Suddenly, a red car behind him began to honk at him, attracting his attention. As it turned out, it was a girl he knew who invited him to get inside the car because she was going to give him a ride. The young man thanked his savior and said that they urgently needed to rush to Jiangbei Hospital. The determined girl said that she would be happy to take him, as long as he needs to fasten his seat belts. At the same time, Lin Shui understood that this was the hospital that the Qian family had invested in. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in the medical hall of Lin Hospital. The elder continued to think about what this stranger was going to do next, because he just took it and left, and this is very offensive. Having obtained modern medical equipment, the doctors found that the young master's condition had stabilized, so there was nothing to worry about. Such a serious injury was cured by regular acupuncture, which is truly amazing. The man delegated to his assistant to return, and also asked Qiuji to deal with the company's affairs. Lin Changtian himself was going to stay here in order to thank that guy for saving his son. Because such a mighty young man, really impressed with his abilities, if he worked for them, it would be wonderful, although old man Lin Shui is unlikely to give him up. I turned to the elder, Lin Changtian. I wanted to ask him where that young man went, but such a question was inappropriate, because now this boy was a hospital employee. Because of this, the client began to get angry, because whether to stay or not is his personal business, and it is not up to the head of the hospital to decide. A few minutes later, events continued to occur in a hospital on the other side of the city. As it turned out, Fang Jing herself called the main character and was waiting for him in the corridor on the second floor. The excited young man immediately decided to find out what was happening, because he did not understand why he was called here. The officer looked at the hero and couldn't understand what Dr. Lin was doing here, because she only called Biyun Tao. Feeling awkward, the lady said that she came here with Biyun Tao, and if her help is needed, she will do everything possible. Then Fang Jing decided to tell what happened after the hero left. Her uncle returned and said that he had found another hospital and wanted to send Fang Lin there, and then, as soon as they arrived at the hospital, Dr. Zhang Yang said that Biyun Tao made a random diagnosis. He said that the young man almost killed Fang Lin, and that her condition was just an illusion. Now the uncle and aunt were still in the doctor's office, and she thought that something was unclean here, so she called the main character. These events made the young man extremely angry, because he understood that this whole situation was just fiction. Angry, he decided to ask the girl why her uncle and aunt were so involved in her family affairs. After all, they were not even relatives. The girl simply could not tolerate such statements, and pinched the young man with all her might. Although in reality, Fang Jing didn't know why they treated her sister like that, and it would probably be better to take Fong Lin to the United States for treatment. Approaching closer to the front door, the hero decided to find out if they were really in the office now. The determined guy immediately wanted to enter the office in order to find out what was really going on here. But the girl stopped him, saying that she had heard that Zhang Yang would soon become a member of the Jiangnan Medical Association, and there was no point in disturbing him right away. Hearing this, Lin Shui immediately assumed that this doctor could only be applying for membership. In fact, the girl didn't know him, but she remembered how the old man told her something about Dr. Zhang Yang. He often applied to join, but his medical skill was insufficient, so he didn't pass. In connection with everything he heard, Biyun Tao only concluded that all this meant that this damn doctor was a charlatan. The young man wanted to do everything possible to teach this doctor manners and skills so that he could finally help patients, and not maim them. Screams could be heard outside the door, because Biyun Tao wanted to look into the eyes of this charlatan, but the girls insisted that he should not be so impulsive. Unable to bear it, with all his might the main character broke down the door, kicking it, and burst inside the office. Realizing that this was the same guy, my uncle was simply shocked, because he could not believe it. The mysterious doctor was unshakable, and only observed the entire situation. Feeling very angry, the guy wanted to know where Dr. Zhang Yang was. The stranger continued to watch and turned to the guy who had just burst into the office. After all, there were many people who wanted to seek medical help from Zhang Yang. But to do this, the guy will first need to register and get in line in order to get an appointment. It was Dr. Zhang Yang. His uncle immediately began to tell him that this was the same charlatan he had told him about, and it was he who diagnosed Fong Lin. And the aunt insisted that Dr. Zhang's eyes are like a flashlight, and he can see absolutely any ailment. The villains talked among themselves and discussed that this child was just a fool from the village, so there was nothing to worry about. The evil doctor began to observe the main character, asking him if he was really that charlatan, and he expected Biyun to dare to come alone. All this time the young man only listened and approached the doctor in order to teach him a lesson. The arrogant scoundrel looked straight into Biyun Tao's eyes and told him that he was a charlatan who was dissatisfied with something. Unable to bear this behavior, the guy began to act, and taking advantage of the moment, began to strike incredibly quickly. This blow was intended for a scoundrel who dared to call himself a doctor, and deliberately made an incorrect diagnosis. Taking the scoundrel right by the neck with all his might, Biyun Tao was going to look into his eyes in order to understand his motive. Experiencing severe pain, the impudent man only tried to escape from the strong grip, but it was useless. In order to pacify the liar doctor, Biyun Tao made a powerful blow and slammed the scoundrel right into the floor. Zhang Yang literally began to beg the hero to let him go, because he saw that his opponent was much stronger. But this was completely useless, because the hero felt strong anger towards doctors who were not able to treat. The brave hero believed that the doctor should not be sorry to die even 10,000 times. With the last of his strength, the doctor began shouting to call Jusha and bring him here. The alarmed aunt and uncle began to run in order to call the doctor whom Zhang Yang had just called. Running closer, Fang Jing began to stop him, saying that Zhang Yang was about to die, and he should stop right now. Worried, Lin Shui didn't understand how this guy could be like this, since he even smiled while throwing a punch. Still, the girl decided that she still had to call her grandfather, otherwise there would be even more problems. Fang Jing began to convince Biyun Tao to stop, because he is currently in a society where the law rules, and for this he could be imprisoned. Fortunately, this worked, and he released the insolent man who dared to deceive his patients. With the last of his strength, the scoundrel began to crawl to the side, so as not to suffer even more. Continuing to cough from suffocation, Zhang Yang waited for the guards to arrive, and understood that now the man who wanted to kill him would come to an end. Many people began to move towards the office in order to protect the doctor from the killer. Like a madman, Zhang Yang began to laugh and shouted that death had come for him. After all these events took place in Jiangbei Hospital, which had 24-hour security. None of the doctors understood what happened to Dr. Zhang, and why he called so many security guards. Trying to escape, the doctor shouted at the guard to save him, because he was completely powerless against such a strong opponent. The manager also came, and Zhang Yang began to complain to him that the guy who came into the office was going to kill him. Continuing to cry, the doctor said that he was afraid that others like him might come to their hospital. Such an incident made Du Ruisheng furious because he saw his doctor lying on the floor and begging him for help. Going down to Zhang Yang, the dean of the hospital apologized for what happened to him today. After all, it was the negligence of their hospital, because the doctor was soon going to join the Jiangnan Medical Association, which he shouldn't be angry about. The dean also began to convince the man that he should not worry, because people who do not respect Dr. Zhang Yang will pay for it. Immediately after this, the dean ordered all the guards to take the attacker away from here and send him to the police station. At that very second, Fang Jing stood guard over the main character and shouted that all this action should be stopped, because she is a policeman. Laughing, the dean didn't understand whether the policewoman was really going to cover up this scoundrel, because if she still wanted to be him, then she'd better give him over to the guards. It was then that the girl realized what was really happening in this hospital. After all, it was obvious that the dean was actually covering for this pathetic deceiver, and the main character wanted to look at all this. The young man also wanted to see what the guards could do with him, because they did not yet know how strong he was. Meanwhile, events continued to occur at Lin Hospital, where two elderly men were sitting nearby and were very unhappy. Lin Shui kept thinking that this guy could use the almost extinct chief physician, and it was unknown whether he was really a descendant of that mysterious old man. Suddenly, it dawned on the older man that he needed to see something. Because of this, he decided to call Yin Er so that she could go to the video surveillance room. Some time later, events continued to occur in the video surveillance room. The owner of the hospital literally went crazy when he saw his competitor nearby in the video surveillance room, and did not understand whether this bald old man would really watch the camera footage with them. In Lin Changtian's opinion, this information was not confidential because this young man was also not from their Lin hospital. In addition, it is extremely strange that CCTV cameras were installed in the wards, which is why the offended man was going to complain. Once again, the two rivals began to argue among themselves. Lin Shui ordered the bald scoundrel not to talk nonsense, because it was originally just a massage parlor. Meanwhile, the girl exclaimed that she had finally found the CCTV footage. As soon as they saw what was happening at the moment when the acupuncture was performed, they were immediately amazed by what was happening. Biyun Tao was seen performing acupuncture from CCTV footage. But due to the fact that for acupuncture to be effective it was necessary to undress the patient, the girl immediately became embarrassed and told the men to watch this recording alone. At the same time, the embarrassed girl was getting ready to go and work, because she understood that she had nothing else to look at there. In fact, this spectacle was not a pleasant one, because on the recording there was a man who almost lost his own life. After which, the elders decided to return to the hospital as soon as they watched the recording from the camera. The experienced doctor understood that this was indeed a 9-turn needle technique, exactly the same as that mysterious old man. And the competitor began to realize that another expert had appeared, but he was very young, which is why Lin Changtian was going to find a way to recruit him. Both elderly men were pondering how to lure such a desirable worker. Suddenly, the owner of the hospital's phone rang, and apparently it was a very important call. Lin Changtian answered without hesitation, and it turned out that it was his granddaughter who was shouting that Biyun Tao was in trouble at Jiangbei Hospital and the dean wanted to arrest him, which is why Lin Shui asked her grandfather to come to the place as soon as possible. Events. Immediately after this, during a telephone conversation, very strange sounds were heard, as if someone was fighting, and the man began to panic even more. Angry, grandfather immediately decided to turn to his competitor to tell him a few kind words. Because in fact, Lin Changtian thought that his competitor specifically wanted to beat up the savior, which is why he advised him to call the dean of his hospital to stop him, otherwise the old man was going to do justice on his own. Hearing this, Fang Lin couldn't understand why this child was in Jiangbei Hospital, since he had been here just recently. Taking out his phone, the man began to think about how to resolve this conflict, and who to call first so that the guy would be released. However, Fan realized that the old man was blaming him and called him an unwashed mop, because as soon as they called him, he immediately blamed the people nearby. The two old men started running to go to the hospital and save the young man, who is a really good Chinese medicine doctor. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in Jiangbei Hospital. The brave hero was able to beat literally all the guards who tried to attack him, and was completely unharmed. And the doctor and administrator were simply dumbfounded by what was happening, because they could not even imagine that an ordinary person would be able to beat up an entire squad of trained fighters. This only aroused anger in the leader, and he thought about how else to take revenge on the young man. The boy, in turn, also looked at the enemies and asked if they really didn't like something. Looking at everything that was happening here, Lin Shui concluded that there really was a monster in front of them now. The officer also began to panic, because she understood that ordinary people were not capable of this, and the special forces, in comparison, were not so strong. The beaten doctor also began to panic, because he saw that his plan did not work. The hospital manager did not accept the loss of enemies, and began to say that now the guy had insulted him twice already, because apparently, a hillbilly like him only knows how to wave his fists, and he cannot do anything if he knows how to fight. Looking around, Biyun Tao decided to ask a counter question, asking who was behind everything that was happening. Sitting down on a chair, the hero wanted to ask the owner of this hospital why he recruits such scoundrels and charlatans for such positions. This statement caused the administrator to tremble, and he began to panic again, because he could not believe that this impudent guy would stay here and wait for the owner of the hospital. Feeling very anxious, the administrator still wanted to call the main owner, and asked the guy to wait. The call came to Lin Changtian's number, and as it turned out, he specifically rejected the call, as he did not want to communicate with the administrator. Immediately after this, the elderly man asked his driver to hurry up and make sure to get to the hospital faster than Lin Shui. Thus, the hospital owner did not answer the call because he rejected the call. This caused the administrator to panic even more, because he no longer knew how to proceed. The patients also began to panic, because they wanted to find out what happened in the office. Other doctors told them that one fool beat up Dr. Zhang because of a patient. A few minutes later, the owner of the hospital also came. There were also guards present near him, and he immediately decided to find out where this damn dean was. All the people around them immediately realized that this was their sponsor and co-owner of the hospital, and money is always good. A kind nurse called to the man, saying that the dean was inside the office. The excited scoundrel looked straight into the eyes of the elderly man, and was very glad that he had already arrived here, and immediately began to talk about how he did not know that the arrival would be made so soon, and even began to apologize for disturbing him. The administrator also said that the scoundrel who was in the office hit Dr. Zhang and beat up all the guards. The impudent man also said that this guy is quite capable, because just now the security was unable to kick him out, which is why he did not hope that Lin Changtian would help them in this situation. All this time the man did not say a word, he only closely watched his charge's gaze. This look caused even more stress for the fat man, and he began to get nervous, because he did not understand what the real problem was here. Soon after, Lin Changtian hit the insolent administrator with all his might, saying that he would kill him now. All the people who watched this conflict were simply dumbfounded, because they did not understand why the owner of the hospital behaved this way. Anger overcame the elderly man, and he shouted at the administration, saying that no one dares even say a bad word towards this guy. Lying on the floor, the administrator could not understand what was wrong, he only held his cheek, because he was experiencing unbearable pain. Turning to his supervisor, the dean decided to ask what was wrong and who this guy really was. Sighing heavily, the man said that this was Mr. Biyun Tao, and he was his respected guest, and he also saved his son. After this, the scoundrel lying on the floor had to understand why he was hit. Starting to cry, the administrator tried to justify himself, saying that he did not know about this, and immediately apologize. Standing on all fours, the villain began to turn to the hero, saying that he was very sorry and he apologized. The young man did not immediately decide to forgive this scoundrel, but first thought about whether he should be forgiven in this situation. Getting even more nervous, the man began to wait, because he understood that his fate and career depended on this guy's resignation. The owner of the hospital continued to watch everything that was happening, to understand what fate the pathetic administrator would have. Suddenly, the fat scoundrel said that Dr. Zhang Yang was to blame for all this, because it was he who offended the important guest. The doctor tried his best to justify himself, and asked that they first listen to his apology and explanation of the whole situation. At the same time, someone very important was walking along the corridor of the hospital, because he also wanted to be present at the scene of events. The people present saw that someone very familiar was approaching this office, but did not immediately understand who it was. When they saw the elderly man, they immediately realized that it was President Lin Changtian, who also wanted to influence the resolution of this conflict. Feeling intense anger, "O powerful man," he asked the crowd where Biyun Tao was. Realizing that something very terrible was about to happen, only one doctor decided to point his finger at the fact that the young man was in the office. The uncle and aunt began to look at each other, discussing that they needed to get out of this hospital. As soon as they decided to leave, they immediately, like ninjas, began to climb the walls of the hospital in order to get out of it. The excited granddaughter began to calm her grandfather down so that he would stop and wanted to understand why he was here. Dr. Zhang immediately recognized President Lin, and begged him to also listen to his explanation, because he was going to tell about everything that happened here. The hero noticed that all the respected doctors of this hospital had gathered here, which is why he was going to tell the whole truth about what was really happening here. Without hesitation, the young man explained that this Zhang Yang had problems with medical ethics, which is why he suggested that a thorough investigation be carried out, otherwise he might harm even more patients. I understand that this is also his fault. The elderly man agreed with the guy and said that he would definitely deal with this. Yin decided to tell her grandfather that this Zhang Yang was applying to join the medical association. Thus, the man decided that since Biyun Tao said that he had problems with medical ethics, this doctor would be closed to the association forever. Trying to fix everything, the doctor began to make excuses again, and could not believe that his career ended in one day. In despair, the scoundrel began to cry and beg to be spared. The people present nearby did not understand why President Qian and Lin were so polite to this stranger, but they still understood that this happened because this guy saved young Mr. Qian. Watching everything happen, Fang Jing also wanted to resolve the conflict with her family. But when she called her uncle, the user she dialed was out of range. A few minutes later, the elderly man thanked the gentleman for taking care of this dog and helping him clean up the hospital, which made Chongming very grateful to him. The man also reserved one place, and he hoped that Biyun Tao would not refuse to come there with him, and this place is called Eugene. That's where he was going to wait for the guy. Feeling the taste of money, the young man immediately agreed, because he realized that he would probably be paid for the treatment, and asked to take the total amount of money there for him. For such a rich man this was not a problem, and he happily agreed, after which they said goodbye. Some time later, events continued to occur in Fang Jing's car. The good-natured man decided to turn to the young man and ask him if he really was a student of that same master. Hearing this, the girl could not stand it, and understood that her grandfather constantly talked about this master, but she did not understand who he really was. As it turns out, this guy's teacher is the one from whom Lin Changtian previously wanted to learn medical skills, but he told him that he had no talent and refused to accept him as a student. It was because of this that the man was truly ashamed that he could not reach such a high level. The young man decided to cheer up the elderly man and asked him not to worry about this, because his master said that he had already achieved good results in this world. This statement greatly encouraged Lin Changtian, and he even blushed, because he understood how valuable this praise was. After which, the hero began to remember how the master talked to him about how he should come down from the mountain and do something for him. First he needed to find the one who is the president of the Chongqing Medical Center, and he should shelter him. The master also added that this man understands a little about medicine. Events continued to take place at Lin Hospital, where two sisters overheard a dialogue between their grandfather and the best doctor of Chinese medicine. The elderly man still wanted to find out from the guy why his master sent him here, as if he wanted to convey something. And this was indeed the case, after which the boy began to take something out of his pocket. As it turned out, it was some kind of scroll that was intended specifically for the owner of this hospital. In order to forgive this letter, the old man needed glasses, and he immediately took them out, after which he carefully began to study the scroll. After reading the letter, Lin Changtian said that now the guy can have fun with him first, since his master asked for it. That is why Yin and Lin Shui would have to arrange a room for him, and the man sincerely hoped to accommodate him by finding him a home so that he could familiarize himself with the city. This was truly good news for the young man, and he thanked the old man for such concern. After overhearing the conversation, the girls couldn't believe that Grandpa would actually allow this guy to live here, even though they knew that his skills were very good, and perhaps it was really the right decision for him to stay here. From such statements, my little sister became extremely angry, and thought that her little sister had decided to betray her, even though she was telling the truth. Opening the door, the young man immediately saw that the girls were standing nearby and quarreling among themselves. The friendly guy decided to greet the girls again and said that his name was Biyun-tao. The elder sister did not react to this in any way, because she treated the young man badly because she thought that he could not be a better doctor than her. The younger sister explained that the guy should not pay attention to her, because she has such a character. A little excited, the girl decided to take Biyun-tao to his new room so that he could settle down there. Looking around the place where he would live, the guy was shocked, because he couldn't even imagine how one could live in this city without money. In fact, In-air decided to explain that they rent land from the government, and are not that rich, and the person he recently saved has a fortune worth tens of billions. The young man simply could not believe it when he heard that the old man, whose son he saved, had a fortune estimated at tens of billions. Stepping aside, the smart hero began to think that his client was so rich that he would need to ask for more money. The guy was very happy with the thought that perhaps he could ask for 1 million, or even 2, and it wouldn't be a big deal anyway, because they were rich. Winking at the girl, the brother decided to tell her that he was inviting her to go with him and rob that old man Chin, that is, to go have dinner with him, and as it turned out, In-air was not even against such an offer, but was going to warn her grandfather and sister. Immediately, Biyun-tao began to deny, saying that he only wanted her to go with him, because their grandfather and Changming are always yelling at each other, so it's better to do without him. Some time later, events continued to occur near the restaurant where the main character was invited. Looking around, the young man could not believe that this place was really so cool, and the hotel not far from it was really big, which is why the price for food must have been incredible. Changming's ward said that Biyun-tao was already expected, and he should go inside. Having entered the building, the man met the savior along with his wife. After all, they had been waiting for them for quite a long time. The old man was really very happy to see such a nice doctor, and said that his wife also wanted to thank Biyun-tao. It was really very pleasant to listen to this praise, and the hero asked not to be so polite in front of him. After all, this is his job. Opening the door nearby, Changming asked Master Biyun-tao not to be so modest, and asked them to go inside and sit down at the table. Entering the room, the young man noticed that something was clearly wrong here, because he saw several more people. The puzzled guy immediately decided to ask the elderly man who all these people were. As it turned out, all of these people were business partners of Changming. At first, this question puzzled the man, but then he said that he would like to introduce Biyun-tao to his business partners. Hearing this, the young man could not believe that these were really more business partners, but the elderly man really wanted to introduce him to them. The first man smoking a cigar was Weidong, who looked very pretentious, and could not believe that this was really the doctor that Changming had previously talked about. Nevertheless, the man decided to extend his hand, as a sign of acquaintance, so that the young man could shake it. Although the hero saw how they treated him, he still understood that it was necessary to respond to this gesture. As soon as Biyun-tao extended his hand, the scoundrel simply slapped it, a sign of introduction, although there should have been a handshake. What was happening really infuriated the man, because he saw that the fat guy was really wrong in this situation. But still, Changming decided not to show it, and just laughed, after which he wanted to introduce Biyun-tao to other business partners. Cheng Xiao was also sitting nearby. He is not from Jiangnan, but already has good influence in this city, although the guy was against the old man praising him so much, because he still knew that he was not that cool. The impudent man still couldn't understand why they were all being introduced here at all. Cheng also couldn't believe that this guy really was a genius doctor. After all, even children knew that the older the doctors, the more experience they have, and Changming now wants to say that this little boy participated in this project to get his share, but Cheng was not going to let this happen. The old man still decided to tell his business partner, because perhaps he didn't know yet, but his son almost died, and Mr. Biyun-tao was able to save him, take him from the brow of death, which is why you shouldn't think that you can look at this guy looking down on him, just because of his age, because he is very talented. Confused, the girl behind began to convince the hero that they should better leave, because the people here are really unfriendly. The smart guy understood that even if they are looked down upon, it is still known that these people will never achieve success, and there is no need to worry about their point of view. Watching the hero, the impudent man even became interested in what he was up to. After all, everyone suspected that Biyun Tao was going to deceive everyone in this room. The silent old man sat at the table all this time and listened to their conversation, drawing conclusions. The elderly man said that he did not know what skills this young man had, but he thinks that for the current project, this young guy obviously won't help them much. Realizing that he did not belong here, the young man exclaimed that it seemed that everything was over, and everyone present had already made a decision. After all, in fact, the hero understood that everyone here despised him, and he really had nothing to do here. Looking straight into the guy's eyes, the scoundrel said that Biyun Tao may indeed be a capable doctor, but he is still a hillbilly, and this changes everything, no matter how good he is. Because a country boy can never become a famous doctor who will surpass other professionals in skills. Unlike Chong Ming, these men were all insiders, and they believed that the hillbilly had nothing to do here. Suddenly, the hero exclaimed that his interlocutor was very ill. He may look strong and powerful, but this is only on the outside, and besides, he is not only sick, but also blind. Hearing this, the impudent man could not believe these words, and began to shout that he was strong both inside and outside. This man seemed to have gone mad, and he literally started yelling that it was Biyun Tao who had gone mad. Knocking on the table, the experienced doctor began to say that the tips of his interlocutor's fingers were gray, and the veins hardly protruded. It was clear that his heart was weak and there was not enough strength to circulate the blood. Lately, the man must have had hypoxia and also sometimes felt dizzy. Realizing what this country boy was saying now, the man began to realize that he was indeed right. The young man continued to knock on the table incessantly, as if in this way he was signaling something. Turning again to the scoundrel, the hero decided to find out whether he was really right in this situation. Their glances crossed, but the man did not want to admit it, and simply continued to remain silent. After all, in fact, the interlocutor understood that the young man would not be able to prove to him that he was really sick, and Chong Ming did something stupid when he found this incompetent doctor. The old man also exclaimed that this guy could not find out about diseases just by looking at his fingers, and everyone insisted that Chong Ming find a person who truly understands medicine. Listening to all this, the old man only continued to remain silent and drew conclusions from everything that happened here. In fact, Chong Ming saw that Mr. Biyun Tao was really sure that his interlocutor was sick, which meant that he was truly an excellent doctor. The hero not only knew about his interlocutor's illness, but also knew that he would not live to see 30 years of age. Just today, Biyun Tao wanted to do everything possible to figure out the insolent person and bring his illness out. The tapping on the table infuriated the scoundrel very much, and he was literally furious because he could no longer tolerate it. Looking at the head of the council, the elderly man asked to take this guy out of here, while he was going to pay today's bill. Jumping up from the table, the impudent man began to shout that this was enough, and one should not think that Biyun Tao was really such a good doctor. As soon as the interlocutor stood up, his heart immediately began to pound, as if he had a heart attack. This is exactly what the young man sought, so that his opponent would understand that he was really wrong, and his lies would soon be revealed. Pain began to permeate all the man's internal organs, and he stood with incredible difficulty on both legs. Sweat gradually began to appear on the scoundrel's face, because he was experiencing incredibly strong pressure on his heart. Clutching his heart, the interlocutor could not understand what was the matter and what had happened to him. Soon after this, redness began to appear on the face, and the sweating increased. None of those present, besides the main character, could understand what was going on and why their colleague was feeling so bad. Continuing to die painfully, the scoundrel screamed with the last of his strength from the pain of his heart. Coming closer, the old man saw that his partner was really sick and needed urgent medical attention. Feeling a heart attack, the villain began to shout that the hero would never knock on the table again. This is exactly what the young man sought, because in this way he was able to punish the scoundrel who did not believe that he was a doctor. Now, everyone present here should have understood that a first-class doctor was indeed sitting in front of them. Continuing to convulse, the man exclaimed with all his strength that he really believed that Biyun Tao was a doctor. Starting to cry, he literally began to beg the main character to save him as soon as possible, because he still did not want to die. These screams could be heard literally throughout the entire hotel, because the business partner was screaming as loud as he could. Suddenly, the young man exclaimed that he was not here to treat someone. If he wanted to be treated by him, then he should first make an appointment. In Air couldn't believe what had just happened, and didn't understand why the young man's interlocutor felt so bad, as if it was some kind of black magic. Still, Chongming was very happy that Bi Yuntao was recognized by his partners, and now they truly believed that he was a real doctor. After laughing, the old man suggested that everyone eat first because today's meeting was organized to thank the master. Meanwhile, the scoundrel gradually began to feel better, and his heart attack gradually passed. Some time later, Chongming thanked the young doctor for coming and also apologized for everything that was happening here. His wife was also very worried about what happened today, and she actually apologized seriously because of it. Fortunately, the scoundrel actually realized that he was at fault in this situation and asked his business partner not to be nervous because he was going to make amends and take care of Mr. Bi Yuntao. Although this whole situation caused anxiety in the elderly man, he still understood that this was better than what had happened before. Thanking the young man, he handed him a golden card, saying that this was his little gift, and he should accept it. The joy of the main character was visible to the naked eye, because finally he will have money. With joy, Bi Yuntao took the golden card and asked him to now treat him as his best friend. Although this made the man feel uncomfortable, he was still glad that such a capable doctor agreed to accept his gift. Thus, Chongming was about to leave and wished everyone a good evening. The old man immediately began to think about how to make up for the situation that happened earlier. Addressing the hero, he said that he would give his business card. If he needed help, he could call and get the necessary help. The old man also hoped that they would have the opportunity to work together in the future. It turned out that this elderly man was a professor at Yao University, which was indeed very prestigious in this city. The professor was truly amazed at the young man's skill, and wished him luck, because now it was time for him to go. Meanwhile, In-er called the main character and told him that Xiao Cheng was already in the car, and it was time for them to go. Suddenly, the boy remembered that he had been given a gold card, and he needed to use it as soon as possible. Immediately he began to run to the ATM in order to quickly withdraw the money that he had just received. Watching this, the girl was not even surprised, because she understood that Bi Yuntao had no money before. As soon as the guy inserted the card into the ATM, he immediately began counting the number of zeros in the amount that was in his bank account. Now he had a whole 1 million yuan on his bank card, and he was really incredibly happy about it. All Bi Yuntao could think about was how much money he had in his bank account and how he would spend it. The people present in the car were truly shocked by the behavior of this young man. Suddenly, the man decided to invite the main character to go to a recently opened exhibition of stones. For the hero, this was a really interesting proposal, because he had never heard of such exhibitions before. Even In-er was surprised that her friend did not know about such stone exhibitions. In fact, there was nothing scary about it, and as soon as they arrive there, they can immediately see what kind of exhibition awaits them. The concerned man nevertheless decided to find out whether he really only had 30 years left to live. Feeling awkward, the young man said that he was not a god, and could not really be so accurate. From such a serious diagnosis, the man was really very scared, and now he knew that Bi Yuntao really likes to joke, because this year the patient will turn 25 years old, and if everything is as the doctor said, then he only has 5 years left to live. Still, the hero could not hide the truth, and said that his interlocutor would not really live long, because the problem was in the heart, and if he was lucky, he could live a few more years, and if he was unlucky, he would soon die. From such news, the man immediately began to laugh in panic and gradually drove off the road. Turning around, the scoundrel still wanted to find out if the gentleman was really joking, and this was just a mockery of him. Unfortunately, all this was not a joke, and Bi Yuntao expressed his dissatisfaction, saying that in this case he should first go to the hospital to be sure of the heart problems. These statements only made the man nervous, and he did not understand what to do in this case. His mood immediately changed, and he began to think about how it was still possible to correct this situation. Some time later, a group of young people arrived at an exhibition of stones and parked not far from expensive cars. The man also warned that since they and Miss were here for the first time and knew nothing about this place, he urgently asked them to behave carefully so as not to say too much. The exhibition of stones itself was organized by influential businessman Zhang Zhengtian, who was also supposed to be present at this event. Only the young man did not understand what kind of businessman he was and why he was so famous. Walking inside, Many women who were servants in this palace immediately began to greet the main character and his company. The administrator of the establishment said that all the stones were brought by Boss Zhang from the south, and the price may change depending on the size of the stone. The guy and Een Air really didn't feel at ease here, but they still wanted to see what kind of stones were present at this exhibition. The first showroom was Tianzhou. There were some pretty good stones there. This is a great opportunity for them to show off their skills. Their main hall was also present nearby, but the stones in it were worse than the previous one. There is also the Tianwan Hall, where the stones of the worst quality are found, and it is a great opportunity for them to look at today's stones when visitors are still a little older. Suddenly, the entire staff turned their attention to Master Sun, who also showed up at this event. The receptionist wished her clients good luck, saying that they needed to use their eyes correctly to choose a good stone. Master Sun's presence caused alarm among the protagonist's new friends, and they did not understand why he was there. The worried man told Bi Yuntao that they had better take a look at the exhibition hall and go inside. In general, the young man was not against it, but he was very interested in why this master caused such fear among his friends. These mysterious people at the exhibition really looked menacing, and it was obvious that they were dangerous. At the same time, the hero has already gone inside one of the halls in order to see the exhibition samples of stones. Looking around, he was truly impressed to see such beauty. Many varieties of stones lay on the table, and guests looked at them to see if they were worth making a purchase. Each of those present wanted to understand whether there was any precious material in the stone, and for this purpose flashlights were used to calculate the value. Coming closer to one of the stones, the hero still wanted to find out what was so valuable about these stones. As it turns out, most of these stones contain jade. The so-called stakes on the stone are nothing more than bets on the quantity and quality of jade in them. Some people get rich all their lives thanks to stones, while others, on the contrary, lose everything. Once upon a time, one person bought a stone for tens of thousands of dollars, but sold the treasures inside it for millions. Some people could even get their hands on imperial green jade, which was worth much more. Looking at these stones, the boy understood that the money was really big, but if there was jade in the stone, then he could make a lot of money. The young man immediately became excited, because he understood that in this way he could double or even triple his money that was in his bank account. Using his abilities, Bi Yuntao began to act and tried to figure out whether there really was jade in the stone nearby. At the same time, some scoundrels nearby were looking at the guy who came for the stones, and were amazed at how idiotic he really was. Looking at his comrade, the man also realized that he needed to help him a little. Feeling awkward, the guilty man saw that Biyun was watching one of the stones with interest, which is why he was going to buy it for the young man. In fact, the guy thought that it was not worth doing this, because he looked for quite a long time, but could not understand whether there was jade in it or not, which is why it is not worth wasting money. Although the man understood that this was a waste of money, they were still friends now, and it was necessary to give at least some gift as a sign of friendship. Still, the new comrade was also not a pro, like the hero, and there was nothing wrong with that, but he thought that they should choose the stone that Biyun had looked at earlier. After which, the friend decided to call one of the exhibition workers, because he was going to buy this stone. The worker immediately decided to find out about the diggers, whether they wanted to take the stone with them, or cut it here, and the man said that they could see here what was inside, because he bought this stone for his friend, and he thinks that he will interesting to know if there is jade there. The old friend even began to mock the man, saying that he would not spare any money in order to become friends. Now even the exhibition staff wondered whether this stone could truly become a treasure. One of the workers even understood that just by looking at this stone, you can immediately understand that this is a really good sample, but they should know what a risk it is. It may look great, but no one knows what's inside. The man was also overcome with excitement, and he exclaimed that he had enough talking and needed to cut. Having picked up the stone, the mason began to use a huge saw to cut the stone. Everyone was amazed that the youth today are really brave. For them hundreds of thousands of yuan is like a joke. All the old people present here were no longer the same as before, although they had never seen so much money before. Suddenly, someone put their hand right on the guy's shoulder when he didn't even expect it. As it turned out, it was Xiao Sun, who was a police trainee, and he wanted to ask Cheng Xiao why he decided to buy this stone. The arrogant man was even going to buy the stone from Cheng Xiao, because he thought that it would be a good idea, because the stone would still be empty. But a good friend decided to refuse, and asked Master Sun not to worry, because he bought this stone for his friend. He also said that in any case he could afford to buy this stone. For the scoundrel, this was a blow to self-esteem, because he hoped that in this way he could insult the young entrepreneur. Now everything that was happening here was boring for Xiao Sun, and he just wanted to see what would come out of this stone. The huge saw continued to cut the stone, and at the same time an additional device moistened it so that it did not split. One of the pieces of stone fell onto the conveyor, and green gaps were visible on a small part. Looking at the stone, the young man even began to think that it really was jade. The exhibition worker said that this jade stone seems to be available, however, the soil is difficult to distinguish, the pulp does not separate, and the structure of the material is loose, which is not suitable for carving. It can be polished a little and made into an ornamental stone at home. Feeling restless, the young man realized that hundreds of thousands had been flushed down the toilet, and he felt that there was something in this stone, but he showed strong resistance to it. At the same time, Xiao Sun began to mock Cheng Xiao, saying that buying an ordinary brick did not cost hundreds of thousands of yuan. And in fact, he was lucky, although the main thing is that this brick was already purchased, otherwise someone would have had problems. Hearing this, Biyun Tao could not continue to tolerate what was happening, and asked who this idiot was standing next to them, because his squealing like a pig was annoying. Feeling very angry, the young man continued to watch the scoundrels who dared to behave so impudently. But his comrade Cheng Xiao really didn't like it, and he understood that such an act could be fatal. Like a madman, Xiao Sun began to look at the main character, and was already thinking about what he would do to him. Suddenly, the scoundrel girl exclaimed that she wanted to reveal one little secret for the hillbilly, because today he would not leave here alive. The arrogant man began to deny, saying that the guy who said this would not die, and his lady was simply too cruel. Moreover, they are now in Boss Zhang's territory, but still, Cheng Xiao wanted to teach Biyun Tao a lesson. Since the scoundrel was in a good mood today, and they were already visiting Boss Zhang, he was going to give the young man a chance, and asked him to kneel down, and then hit himself 10 times in the face. And if he doesn't do this, then there will be serious consequences. Hearing this, the young man did not react at all, and only continued to look into the eyes of the insolent. Suddenly, the guy told his granddaughter that since he and Cheng Xiao knew each other, he would also give him a chance, and he should kneel down and call him grandfather 3 times, and then he would forget about what happened today, or else, he can only crawl from here. This statement was clearly a blow to the scoundrel's self-esteem, and at first he only continued to look at the youth. But then, I took it as a joke and started laughing, because I thought that this guy was just joking. I continue to laugh. He decided to ask Cheng Xiao if this is really his friend. And since they are friends, then in this case, the scoundrel ordered the guard to act. The guy told his big bodyguard to make this evening much more interesting. About to strike, the guard shouted that he would now finish off the scoundrel who dared to be rude to his boss. All this time, the boy stood motionless, as if he was waiting for the giant guard to strike. Using his perfect agility, the young man was able to easily dodge a serious blow. Immediately after dodging, a counterattack was about to follow, and Biyun Tao jumped with all his might to strike from the air. Swinging his fist with all his might, the hero wanted to make his strongest blow in order to defeat the giant man on the first try. Due to the fact that the man underestimated the young man, he got what he deserved, and the blow came straight to his jaw. None of those present could believe that this was really happening, because at first glance the puny guy was able to defeat the muscular guard. The young man's girlfriend also did not understand why he was so strong, and how he could even do this. People watching everything that was happening could see a duel that was unequal, but it was Biyun Tao who turned out to be the winner. Looking at this man, Cheng Xiao could not believe that this was really happening, because he hired a bodyguard, whom he paid 50,000 a month, and for some reason he lost. The worried guy began shouting to the hero to stand where he was now. After all, Cheng Xiao's father is the director of the Public Security Bureau. If something happens, Biyun Tao will get what he deserves. As it turned out, the owner of this exhibition was watching everything that was happening, and he asked the security guard to deal with this guy. Hearing that the impudent man's father is an influential director, Biyun Tao could not understand what this means, because he thinks that since his father is the director, then he can do anything. And it was absolutely impossible to understand how such an idiot could be born about such an influential person. With every second the young man came closer, and the scoundrel continued to be nervous, because he understood what he would now get for everything he had just said. All this was so that Bi Yuntao could teach the impudent man politeness and force him to behave correctly. Suddenly, someone nearby stopped the guy, telling him that he should not continue the fight. It was a security guard who had impressive height and muscles. As he came closer, he decided to find out why the stranger was so brave and was doing something similar here. Cheng Xiao began to shout to the guard that the young man who had just nearly killed him was to blame for everything that was happening. Such statements angered the guard even more, and he realized that it was necessary to act and beat Bi Yuntao. The giant man continued to watch Cheng Xiao lying on the floor, and he simply did not know what to do in this situation. Approaching the scene, Zhang Zhengtian, a businessman in Jiangnan City, as well as the owner of the stone betting building, expressed his point of view that Cheng Xiao was the first to offend this guy, which is why the man strongly asked not to disgrace him in front of people, and not to create big problems. Although the hero was stopped, he still felt strong anger, and understood that the scoundrel should get what he deserved. The protagonist's comrades were very concerned about what was happening, and understood that he needed to stop. Yin even concluded that Zhang Zhengtian was not really what the rumors said about him. Zhang Zhengtian again said that there is no malicious intent in his statements, because he is a businessman, and he most believes that only harmony can bring money. Throwing his hands down, the young man said that he really had nothing more to say in this dispute. The owner of this exhibition noticed that the younger brother is a really interesting guy, and he has enough courage. Since they were all fine here, Zhang Zhengtian announced that he had prepared some good wines and asked everyone present to enjoy the exhibition. All this time, Cheng Xiao continued to watch Bi Yuntao, and still felt angry and furious. Even leaving the exhibition, he still thought that he would take revenge on this scoundrel and beat him as best he could. Meanwhile, Zhang Zhengtian turned to the main character and said that he saw everything that happened between him and that idiot. In fact, it was all his neglect of duty as a boss, which is why he decided to apologize to the young man for everything it happened that way. Also, the owner of the exhibition handed out his business card and said that if the young man had any problems, he could simply contact him, and his guys would try to help. Taking the business card in his hands, Bi Yuntao thanked Boss Zhang and said that if he had a need, he would definitely come to him. The smart guard was able to identify that the young man in front of him was a doctor, and he smelled incredibly strongly of medicine. The boss also understood that young people today are so interesting, and a good mood in this case is inevitable. Looking at his company, the guy discovered that two of his friends were no longer in the hall. Due to the fact that there were only the two of them left, Yin and the guy headed somewhere. The girl could not understand why they were already leaving somewhere, because they had just arrived. In fact, the young man just wanted to earn money, because such an opportunity does not come along every day. Realizing that this was just excitement, Yin decided to calm him down, saying that the chance of finding a good stone was less than 1%, and it was not clear how it was possible to make money here. Bi Yuntao just couldn't stop himself and wanted to see how he could win his money. Still, the girl was very nervous, because she understood that Cheng Xiao might return soon, and then they would have trouble. Turning to his companion, the young man exclaimed that he should not be so afraid, because in strength he certainly would not lose, and his people were not his opponents. Some time later, events continued to occur in one of the halls, where already in the third cut stone there was jade. The people present were simply shocked, because they saw that this guy was really very insightful, although the young man understood that he had deliberately chosen several bad stones so that he would not be suspected of anything, but most likely he would still reveal his secret. However, the young man has already begun to feel the jade better, and the better the jade, the stronger he feels it. The boy asked Yin for 2 more bad stones because he didn't want to attract the attention of boss Zhang Zhengtian. The girl, in turn, did not understand how her brother could find out which stone the jade was in, and it was difficult for him to explain. At the same time, events continued to occur in the second side of the Tianzi Hall, where Zhang Zhengtian was addressing Bo Jane, saying that he had heard that he had already found 2 jades in a row, and that was really impressive. Jian Jianfeng's intuition was truly at its best today, so he only spent 2 million to produce beautiful jade worth 6 or 7 million. And as it turned out, no one dared to buy the stones that he noticed. This ability to find the best made Zhang Zhengtian very angry, but since the man was his guest today, he could only wish him the best. This was really a good idea for the guest, and he was sincerely glad that he was able to find 3 whole stones with jades. The people present even had a feeling that a war would break out between the 2 bosses, but according to the rules of their gang, the stone gambling business in Jiangnan City could only be introduced by Jian Jianfeng. And now Zhang Zhengtian has appeared here, and it is unknown who will win in this case. Zhang Zhengtian's advisor told him that at this rate, they would lose all their money if this continued. But in turn, the man understood that he could not do anything in this situation. After all, they opened the doors for business, and they can't just turn away guests. Meanwhile, Yin Er and the main character were discussing that this was truly an amazing day, because today they could make a net profit of 600,000 yuan to 700,000 yuan in one night by betting on stones, and it was much faster than making money at the clinic. Realizing that this was dangerous, Biyun Tao asked his partner not to be so loud. After all, they had to get away with impunity, otherwise they might get into trouble if Boss Zhang found out about it. Suddenly, Zhang Zhengtian came up and asked his brother to stay, because he wanted to offer him a request that he could not refuse.